In this video, they're asking us to divide these two polynomials. The first thing I want to do is to write this dividend into standard form. I'm also going to do something special that I haven't done in the other videos yet, but what I'm going to do is as I write it in standard form, which is basically to put the highest degree term first, and then the next highest degree term, so on and so forth, I'm going to actually add some dummy terms in here. And what that means is that, so I have x to the fourth here as my first term. I'm going to put a plus 0 x to the third in. That's just a placeholder because I don't have an x to the third quantity. Then I'll have minus x squared, and then I'm going to put a plus 0x and then plus 1. Now you're not required to do that, but if you do it, it's going to make some of the work when you're doing the division a little bit easier sometimes. However, ultimately in the end, it isn't necessary as long as you're careful to line up your terms when you're doing your division properly. So we'll show what that means in a moment, but let's go ahead then and put the divisor out in front and begin our process of division. So I'm going to have x squared minus x plus 2. So as always, we're going to look at this first term and say, what do I have to multiply x squared by to get it to look exactly like x to the fourth? Now the answer to that question is going to be x squared, right? Multiply x squared times x squared and you will get x to the fourth. We could have actually figured that out by saying x to the fourth divided by the first term in the divisor, x squared. And of course, you know when you're dividing two quantities with the same base, you keep the base and you subtract the exponents. So we would have found that x squared that way as well. But either way, once we know this x squared is here, then it belongs over here, and we can continue the process. Okay, to continue the process, we're going to multiply this x squared by the entire divisor. So x squared times x squared, of course, gives you x to the fourth. Then x squared times a negative x is going to give you a negative x to the third. So you can see why the dummy variable is useful. It kind of gives us a placeholder there. And then we have x squared times a plus 2, which is going to give you plus 2x squared. Okay, so draw my line, change my signs, and this will allow us to do the subtraction that's necessary in this step, right? So we'll have x to the fourth minus x to the fourth. That cancels out. We will have 1x to the third when we combine 0x to the third plus 1x to the third. And then be careful here, these are both negatives, so it's going to give me negative 3x squared for the last piece. I'll carry down my terms, including my plus 0x and my plus 1. And I repeat the process because the degree of this polynomial is greater than the degree of the divisor. Alright, from here we're going to ask basically, what do I multiply x squared by to make it look exactly like 1x to the third? Well, in other words, if you take x to the third and divide it by x squared, what do you get? Well, x to the third divided by x squared is simply x, which means we have to put a plus x here and then distribute this in. So we'll say x times x squared gives you 1x to the third. X times negative x gives you minus x squared. And then x times a positive 2 gives you plus 2x. All right, so we draw our line, change our signs, right? And when you do that, you'll have these terms here cancel out. Then you'll end up with a minus 2x squared. And then finally a negative 2x, and then carry down your 1, so you get plus 1. We need to continue the process once more because the degree of this polynomial is equal to the degree of the divisor, so we can do one more round of division. Okay, so our last step is to say what happens when we divide negative 2x squared by just x squared. Well, of course, the x squareds will cancel out, leaving you just minus 2, which means that minus 2 will go up here, and then we distribute that negative 2 in to our divisor. So negative 2 times x squared, of course, is negative 2x squared, and negative 2 times negative x is going to give you positive 2x, so plus 2x, and then lastly, negative 2 times a positive 2 is going to give us negative 4. So we'll draw our line and change our signs, right? So make this positive, make this sign negative, make this sign positive. All right, so the negative 2x and the positive 2x will cancel out. We'll end up having a negative 4x plus 5 as our remainder. We can't go any further because the degree of this remainder is lower than the degree of the divisor. All right, so our final answer then, our quotient for this problem is x squared plus x minus 2 minus 4x plus 5 over x squared minus x plus 2.